it's Dan at Classic Sailor here, and I'm with crew members Bronwyn and another Dan going aboard the new Thames sailing barge Blue Mermaid. This is the Blackwater in Essex, and we're planning to sail to Brightlingsea. The Blue Mermaid has been built to carry cargo. In fact, she's the first British sailing barge built for cargo since 1930. She's 87 foot long and has a hold that can carry 84 pallets or 150 tons of loose cargo, equivalent to 5 articulated lorry loads. She's also going to take people to sea, and she belongs to the Malden-based charity Sea Change Sailing Trust, who have many years' experience taking all kinds of people sailing and doing great work, especially with young people, often with a wide variety of needs and problems. So while she has cabins aft and forward with 8 berths for her skipper and crew, sometimes the hold will be used for living quarters. I'm talking to Richard Titchener, who with his partner Hilary Halaiko runs both the barge and the Sailing Trust. Richard, I haven't really had a chance to ask you, what was the inspiration for this new barge?
Comes from a variety of sources, Dan, but I think the main one has been our desire to pick up where the final development of Thames barges finished in 1930, with the last tranche built by Fred Horlock at Mistley, and they were the Reminder and Adieu in 1929. And then to the same design, or substantially the same design, the Resourceful and Blue Mermaid in 1930. Now the Blue Mermaid was lost in the Second World War, tragically, with the loss of both crew, having come into contact with a magnetic mine in the Lower Swin. And so of the 7 Horlock barges that were built between 1923 and 1930, 6 remain. And isn't that fantastic that such a high proportion remain? And I think we just felt, wouldn't it be appropriate to replicate that particular one that's no longer with us?
The lost one.
And so that
were they all steel?
They're all steel. Riveted steel construction, of course, in that day. And it is possible to build riveted these days. We just decided, frankly, it was going to be too expensive and too lengthy for us. Because at the end of the day, this charity that I work for, Sea Change Sailing Trust, is not really a preservation organisation. It's an educational charity. It's about using the vehicle of engaging with traditional sailing and seamanship to improve lives and increase people's opportunities, and therefore it wasn't really appropriate to raise money to do a riveted solution purely because it was a nice thing to do.
But she's built to the lines.
Substantially the same. She's welded construction, and because another of our defining passions is that we want to put the barge to work as the original was intended to, and that's to carry cargo. When I grew up over here at Brightlingsea, I used to come down that seawall after school on Friday, and I'd see sailing barges that aren't around anymore, like the Saltcote Bell coming in, rounding up under sail, dropping anchor, and of course it started to appeal to me as a young man that they were doing what looked amazing, and actually most of those were doing it from Malden at that time without auxiliary power. A lot of those, they were re-rigged canal lighters that had gone to lighten the timber ships at Heybridge Basin, for example, and people bought them when that stopped, re-rigged them. They came back into sail having never had power put in them. So that's another interesting feature of what we're trying to do. We're not putting an engine in the boat.
I know it's traditional, but is there another reason? Do you not like engines?
Oh, I see. Yeah, they have a place, of course they do, and we're very happy when it's the right thing to do to have a tow, and I'm sure people sometimes chuckle under their breath when they see us doing that, and why not? That's entirely appropriate that they should do. But there is something very special about the relationship that you obtain with any item, really, any heritage artefact that's doing the job that it was designed to do in the ways that it was designed to. And it's easy to forget, but there are a number of sailing barges and many working boats around the UK, in particular in Falmouth with the working boats there, also here with the smacks, the East Coast smacks and boilies, that do not have engines, never have, or they've been taken out after they've finished as motor fishing boats. And there is a vibrant culture here of engineless and authentic sailing.
So it's a more authentic way.
I think the authenticity is important. I think you have a relationship with the vessel that is fundamentally different if you do not have the option of pushing that button or turning that key.
So it teaches you more respect for the tide.
Because you have to work in harmony with nature, because it sure as hell is going to beat you if you don't. I think that's the bottom line. If you chuck a cardboard box into the River Thames, you get fined for doing it these days, but if you did and you put a nice orange marker on it so you could watch its progress, if it stayed in the best of the tide, it would be at Erith on the next high water, if you started at low water. If you could catch it on something for the ebb, the next tide would take it to the upper pool, wouldn't it? For nothing.
For nothing.
For nothing. So isn't that fantastic that you've got this opportunity to use the elements, the wind and the tide? And it's also good, I think, for young people to get that feeling of being at one with nature. And if we do, then we get far more out of it, we get more enjoyment, our lives become enriched, and hopefully the world is a better planet for it as well, and that's important these days.
Great.
We make a lot of the low carbon aspect of what we do, and of course we hope very much that companies and supporters and people who may put something in this hull to move it from one place to another want to get into that as well with us, because I think it is important that we look another way at how we live our lives and how we use our planet. We started the work that we do using hired vessels, so we were amazingly fortunate in having the support of initially Martin Phillips, who then owned the Wivenhoe, who gave us that first break and said, look, I'm not using this boat a lot this summer, why don't you come and do something with her? And we did, and that was fantastic of him. So that gave us our start.
So is that why you got a Thames barge, because you started with a barge?
I think it's fair to say that my formative experience of barging took place with the Curden Trust, with the Xylonite, where I did 13 years prior to Sea Change becoming established.
Well, let me phrase it another way. What is it about a Thames sailing barge that is so ideal for young people to learn on?
I think you'd have to ask them. But for me, as a young person, I remember thinking, goodness me, there's a 90-foot boat over there, 27 metres in modern parlance. And there's two people able to sail it with this massive sail area, all enabled by winches and doing things in the right order at the right time, and as we said earlier on, harnessing the elements rather than working against them. And I remember being absolutely wowed by recognising just how much fun there could be, how much enjoyment and responsibility and just sheer could be had from a massive great boat with big gear run by a small number of people. I think that's a pretty important thing. But of course,
are they stable? Are they more stable than other boats? Do you know? Is there stability?
They're immensely stable in terms of the shape that they have in the water and the amount of buoyancy that is within that rectangular cross section. I mean, they took the work away from previous types of cargo carrying vessel, the collier brigs, the West Country ketches. Thames barges were still plying for hire successfully through into the 1950s and even to a lesser extent into the 60s. And Phil Latham, who we know well, who was mate in the Cambria with Bob Roberts for 4.5 years in the late 1960s, before Dick Durham became the last mate in trade. Phil says that the Cambria always made a slight profit. Every year she made a slight profit, even into 1970, her final year. There's a lot of interest in how it's possible to use these elements to save the cost of transportation, to keep down the diesel costs for commercial shipping, and of course the amount of pollution that commercial shipping produces. It's just starting to become a key feature in people's minds, along with aviation, isn't it? That transportation is becoming, recognised as a major polluter.
You started your trust and you were using other people's barges. building a barge yourself is a huge undertaking. It must cost a lot of money. So what gave you the idea that you could do it?
Yes, that's a very good question. I think it is fair to say that we probably didn't recognise when we started out the appeal 9 years ago that it was going to take quite as long as it took. We engaged the services of an amazing fundraiser who helped us with the initial strategy and thinking about how we should go about the appeal. And when we started, it was just after the banking crisis. It was just at the worst possible time when people were thinking very carefully about how they were spending their money for very good reason. And there was a bit of a squeeze on the sort of thing we were trying to persuade people to help with. So it wasn't a good time to start.
Could we just remind ourselves how much you were looking for?
Well, we started off, the initial costings took us to around $500,000. We thought it was going to cost about $500,000 to do this job. As time has gone on, we've reviewed the costs a couple of times, and the all-up figure in the end was $750,000. But it's a ship, and where else can you buy a 90-foot boat for £750,000? So I think we're amazingly fortunate, humbled and honoured to have got to where we are now. Yeah, and that's because we've had the support of some amazing people along the way. I think our biggest break, if you like, because it is all about people at the end of the day, our biggest break was going and asking Rear Admiral David Snelson, who at that point was the Chief Harbour Master of the Port of London Authority, whether he would champion our appeal, whether he would chair our appeal committee. And amazingly, he said yes straight away. Port of London has to think carefully about how it spends its money. So it was supporting Sea Change on the basis that we were providing some worthwhile team building experience when they came sailing with us, and I think that they would say that was money well spent. They would see that as a worthwhile but commercial decision. And similarly, when we started to talk to them and others about how important traditional seamanship, wind and water awareness, and a sort of basic understanding of what it is to be afloat on a boat, and how that can inform the kind of seamanship that is now essential for the next generation of waterborne use of the River Thames. They see that as being a benefit, and so do others. So do other riparian businesses on the Thames, and that's wonderful that we've been fortunate enough to have their support.
Can we just describe in a nutshell what Sea Change does? Because you have apprentices, don't you? But you also take groups of young people out.
We ourselves do not employ any apprentices. We do have trainees, and those trainees are funded as part of the Ship Shape Heritage Training Partnership, which is funded by the Lottery Heritage Fund.
And run by National Historic Ships.
Run by National Historic Ships, and that's an absolutely fantastic scheme, taking what we hope to be the next generation of leaders of maritime heritage through an understanding of operating traditional vessels, and a similar course is running for those who go into the museum curatorial side as well. The first programme took 10 people through. I should say not all with us by any means. We had our trainee each year for 2 years, and so did 4 other partners. With the second stage of the programme, there are now 16 trainees going through. And so with the first set of 10, 9 are now working in the sector, which is fantastic, isn't it?
That's superb.
And obviously we hope the same can be said from the next ones. And that is why...
That's one of the reasons
That's why the lottery is supported it. It's very rare for them to do something twice.
That's one of the reasons the PLA supports you.
Yes, I think.
Because you're creating mariners.
We're trying to help to do exactly that, yes. But it is important to recognise that the charity does other things as well. So it isn't just seamanship training, but we start work with people aged 8. There's one particular school where they're aged 8 years of age, and at that age, young people are just starting to be safe to cross the road. That spatial awareness is just starting to come. With someone who's 8 years of age, they can be quite small.
How many 8-year-olds would you have?
It can take 4 of them each side of the anchor windlass, whereas it might take 2 adults. But those 4 or 8-year-olds, believe you me, they can wind that anchor just as well as anybody else, and it's a marvellous thing to see them do.
Oh, that's amazing.
So there's not a great deal that you can't get people to do on a Thames barge, and it is partly this business that a small number of people can make it work, but it's also that there are endless opportunities for engaging in real, authentic, genuine activity, both on deck and domestically down below, so that the whole life of being on the boat is what you're in.
So what do these young people mainly get from coming on the Blue Mermaid, say?
They get a feeling that they're part of something bigger than themselves. I think that's probably what it is. When I say they, I think it's actually fair to say that we do. I mean, we go sailing for fun and we take people with us at the end of the day, and I think that's a good way of looking at it. That if we feel empowered by being able to do this on this amazing boat, then that's something that we can share and pass on, and sometimes encourage and sometimes persuade others to feel part of. I think that's what it's all about, really. It's about being part of something that's bigger than yourself, that adds to your sense of confidence and importance and pride, and giving you a stake in your society and your community, because that's what a boat with a group of people on is. It's a small community going about its business.
Do you see a change in young people after they've been aboard here for, say, a week?
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. And they come back and are encouraged to do so. One of our programs we call a youth sailing scheme, where people can come back to us on an open-ended basis, subject to what they want and they need, and that can go on for years. And we have had people engaged with us for 7 years in that respect. And I was going to go on to say that there's no upper age limit. So Dan, me and you are all right for a bit longer yet. We work with people up to and including those living with dementia. So we're very happy to open the opportunity to anybody who thinks they can benefit from it, to be honest with you.
Is there a mental health aspect to this? Is there a sense in which the sea can act as a healing force? Or boats like this?
I think that there's quite a lot of research to show that positive engagement in physical and cerebral activity is a good thing. I think there's plenty of evidence to support that view, and I think that also pertains for people with mental health issues, with learning difficulties. And I think a good way of looking at it is that there's very little that people can't do if they're given an opportunity, shown how to do it and supported. We're very proud of the statement made by a young man who sailed with us now a few years ago with cerebral palsy, when we were planning the Blue Mermaid. And there were people not unreasonably saying that we should consider modifying the way that she was rigged, the way that she was fitted out, so that we could broaden access, so that we could, for example, take people in wheelchairs. And that led us to question what our strategy should be. And this young man, after he'd thrown himself into everything on here 110%, we sat down and we said, well, how would you like us to design our new barge? How would you like that to take account of your needs? And he said, I don't want you to change anything. I want to be able to do what you can do if you help me to do it. And that was amazing. At the end of the day, I think we recognise that you cannot make a sailing barge, sailing as it does authentically, open access to any disability, simply because you have horses that go across the deck onto which your sails are sheeted. There's a great deal you can do, and I think that they are amazing vehicles for people with all sorts of disabilities, short of a complete lack of mobility.
So it's the authenticity of the boat itself that then, when people can thrive and live aboard and help work her, because they've done it on this authentic vessel, they get a better sense of self-reliance and of well-being.
I think you're right. To put it very pithily, making it real. There are, in fact, very few things that people can't do if you give them that support. Small and frail and not particularly robust people can get that jib in if they do it at the right moment in the right way as the boat's coming through the eye of the wind. 10 rugby players can't do it 10 seconds later.
That's brilliant. You wanted it built in Britain?
We did, and are very proud to be able to say that we achieved that. We did have a look around, but we didn't find that it represented a significant enough saving, for example, to go to Poland.
So why Tom's?
Tom's came in with a competitive price, very competitive price, and a delivery schedule that fitted our timescales and our ability to raise the money along those timescales. And so we were delighted to award the contract to Tom's, and it was a very, very positive relationship. It was such that Karen Toms came to our reception last week when we commissioned the barge finally, and it was lovely to see her. She was built to cargo ship rules, so just to rewind for a moment, the drawings from 1928 that were for those 4 barges I mentioned, Jim Lawrence actually found those and passed them on to us kindly. So we had quite a lot of drawings, not the full set of drawings, unfortunately. I don't think we ever have seen the full set, but we had a lot of drawings, and we took those originals. Our friend Paul Spooner, who was the designer at Fairley Restorations and is now in business on his own account and a very successful naval architect, took those drawings, turned them into a modern shipyard friendly estimating drawing, and that's what we put out. And the rig was designed by Jim Lawrence himself, who, as you know, I'm sure, left school at 15 to join a sailing barge at Colchester Quay called the Gladys, and has never stopped since. Now he's 85.
But she looked very handsome, the gear looked very handsome.
All right, isn't it?
And I thought the stern frame looked very nice.
The sails were then made by his son-in-law Mark Butler, who now runs James Lawrence Sailmakers here at Brightlingsea. The rig was put together by TS Rigging, Jim Dines' team at Downs Road Boatyard. There aren't many people who could do it. I think it's fair to say that as well. But we went to Jim because Jim is, in our mind, the best. And also, it's lovely that his chief rigger now, Tom Cook, was our first Shipshape Heritage Training Partnership Stage 1 trainee. He came with us in 2014. So 5 years on, he's now a rigger at TS Rigging, doing all sorts of things up and down the country. The first time we got underway, we towed down the Blackwater for our shakedown sail towards the end of April. So the wind was light easterly. We set the topsail under the beach at Mill Beach, and the tug just let us go. Barge heeled to the lightest of easterly breezes, and all of a sudden she was alive.
Great feeling. After what, 10 years of work?
Getting on for 10 years, yeah, that's right. And then we gradually set the mainsail, set the foresail, set the mizzen, turned away down the river, and it was immediately apparent that she's an absolute dream. She's a thing of beauty, but she does what it says on the tin, and it's a great honour to be able to sail a new Thames sailing barge.